Found on Reddit, the night singing. Years ago, I worked at a summer camp for Boy Scouts. Every week, I'd take the kids to a hidden spot in the woods where they built shelters and spent the night, earning their wilderness survival badge. One evening, after the shelters were built and dinner was done, we sat around the campfire. It got late. I sent everyone to bed and stayed behind to put out the fire. That's when we heard it. A faint sound like church bells ringing in the distance. The sound repeated every 30 seconds. For nearly half an hour. It was unsettling because the nearest town and the nearest church was more than 30 kilometers away. Then the bells stopped and we heard singing. Not words we could understand, but something like a church choir, only louder, stronger, more voices than I could count. As midnight approached, the singing grew louder, as though it was moving closer to us in the dark. The scouts were terrified. I lied to calm them down, saying it was just a late-night church service. Finally, around 1 a.m., the singing stopped. A few days later, I learned the truth. Nearby, there had been a Ku Klux Klan march. Those were the bells. Those were the voices. The mystery of Cologne Cathedral. Real creepy stories. The world-famous Cologne Cathedral is considered an unrivaled masterpiece of Gothic architecture. But few know the chilling legend behind its endless construction. Work on the cathedral began in the 13th century, and even today it remains technically unfinished. Many believe this is because of a deal with the devil. The first master builder, Gerhard von Ryle, spent years trying to perfect his designs. Frustrated, he burned draft after draft. One day, he encountered a stranger who had completed the very blueprint Gerhard had been struggling to create. Overwhelmed, Gerhard begged to buy it. The stranger agreed, but demanded a horrifying price: Gerhard's soul, and not only his, but also the souls of his wife and child. The stranger was none other than the devil himself. He promised that in exchange, he would build the cathedral in only 3 years. Gerhard, believing the devil would fail, agreed. The cathedral rose with incredible speed. But as the final days approached, Gerhard realized the devil might succeed after all. His wife, noticing his torment, demanded the truth. When he confessed, she devised a plan. According to the pact, the cathedral had to be finished before the first rooster crowed on the morning of the 4th year. On that fateful day, just as the devil prepared to place the last stone, Gerhard's wife imitated the crow of a rooster. Thinking dawn had come, the devil flew into a rage. He smashed parts of the unfinished towers and cursed the cathedral forever. The legend says that if Cologne Cathedral is ever fully completed, the world will end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more chilling legends and real creepy stories. Based on true events, The Devil's Footprints in Devonshire. February 7th, 1855, Devonshire, England. After a heavy overnight snowfall, the townspeople awoke to something terrifying. Across the fresh snow appeared a trail of strange hoof-like prints, but these were no ordinary tracks. Witnesses claimed they seemed to climb walls, rooftops, even fences meters high. Where the prints stopped at an obstacle, they continued straight across it, as if the creature could walk anywhere it pleased. Henry, the local baker, was among the first to see them. At dawn, he noticed the prints outside his bakery, perfectly uniform, like they'd been left by a tiny donkey. Yet something was wrong. There was no distinction between front or back, left or right hooves. They were identical, each about 10 centimeters long and 7 centimeters wide, spaced evenly 20 to 25 centimeters apart. Too busy with work, Henry returned to his ovens, but others could not ignore what they saw. Albert Branford, the local schoolmaster, gathered a group of residents to follow the tracks. They found them everywhere, across fields, over rooftops, even spanning frozen rivers and open water. It was as though whatever made them could walk on air. In total, the tracks stretched over 150 kilometers in a single night, and then, mysteriously, they ended. The townspeople panicked. Many grabbed pitchforks and torches, searching for the culprit, but nothing was ever found. Whispers spread quickly. This was no animal, no man. It was the work of the devil himself. From then on, they were known only as the devil's footprints. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more chilling stories based on true events.
The Silent Place Theory. Real creepy stories. Have you ever heard of the Silent Place Theory? It suggests that if you're in nature, in the woods, a field, or the mountains, and suddenly everything goes silent, the birds stop singing, the insects stop buzzing, the wind itself feels muted, you should leave immediately, because silence can mean danger. It may mean that something is near, something you do not want to encounter. Story 1. One day, while hiking along a familiar trail, I noticed the forest suddenly went silent. No birds, no rustling, nothing. The usually noisy woods felt disturbingly still. Uneasy, I decided to change my route and quickly left the area. Later, I spoke to a local ranger who told me that in that same spot, they had found fresh tracks of a massive, unknown creature. That sudden silence may have saved me from meeting it. Story 2. Another night, a friend and I built a fire and tossed some potatoes into it. Then we realized the forest had gone completely silent. No owls, no insects, no movement at all. It was unsettling. My friend insisted we should leave. Not even a minute later, we heard it. A loud cracking of trees, followed by a deep, guttural roar. We ran as fast as we could. To this day, we don't know what it was, but I'll never forget that silence. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more chilling stories. Creepy theories and hypotheses. Serial killers are everywhere. Most people think serial killers are rare. We imagine them as strange, isolated figures with dark, twisted auras. But the truth is far more terrifying. According to FBI statistics, in the United States alone, more than 600,000 people go missing every year. Around 90,000 are never found. Some vanish by accident, but many become prey to killers we'd never suspect. Experts estimate that there may be as many as 2,000 active serial killers in the US right now. And in other countries, the numbers may be similar, just hidden by lack of data. There's even a term for it, the phenomenon of the undetectable predator. Old serial killers were caught because they made mistakes. They left bodies, evidence, traces. But today's killers, they've learned from the past. Every captured murderer is a lesson book for those who remain free. They know about surveillance cameras, DNA testing, psychological profiling. They don't kill impulsively. They plan, carefully and patiently. Unlike the old days, they don't look suspicious. They live normal lives. They have jobs, families, children. They could be doctors, lawyers, teachers, the person smiling at you in the elevator, the coworker at your office, your neighbor. They understand how investigators work, and they adapt. They know search histories can expose them, phones can be tracked. They build alibis, they use multiple devices.
Some kill once a year, some once every few years. And some may be online right now, reading true crime forums, studying the mistakes of others. Why are fewer serial killers caught today? It's not because they've disappeared, it's because they've become smarter. They've stopped making mistakes, which means they are still among us. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more creepy stories and chilling theories. Based on true events, The Man at the Window. One winter evening, a 16-year-old girl was home alone. Snow fell outside as she wrapped herself in a warm blanket and watched TV. Close to midnight, she began to feel uneasy. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed movement outside the window. In the darkness, she saw a man. His face was scarred, twisted into a grotesque smile. In his hand, a knife. Terrified, the girl whispered to the police on the phone, "There's a man with a knife outside my window." Minutes passed. The man stood there, motionless, staring at her until she finally heard sirens. Police arrived, but found no one outside. No footprints in the snow, nothing. The girl insisted she had seen him. Then, one officer walked around the sofa and froze. On the carpet were wet footprints. Beside them, a knife. He turned to the girl and said, "You weren't looking outside. You were looking at his reflection. The whole time, he was behind you." Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more true creepy stories. Creepy facts you probably didn't know. Here are some creepy facts you may not have heard before. If you were born in February, March, June, or September, statistics suggest you may have the instincts of a serial killer. Right now, there are 40 volcanoes on Earth that could erupt at any moment and kill up to 1 billion people. At some point in your life, a stranger has thought about killing you. It sounds insane, but death is always 6 minutes away. Every breath you take resets that countdown. In the 1800s, many dentures were made from the teeth of dead soldiers. Crocodiles can climb trees, and they do it regularly. Hippos kill more people in Africa than lions, elephants, leopards, buffalo, and rhinos combined. After being severed, a human head remains conscious for several seconds. And most serial killers are born in November. Sweet dreams. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more creepy facts and horror stories. Creepy theories and hypotheses. Dajjal, the Antichrist. In Islamic tradition, Dajjal, the Antichrist, is described as a false messiah and deceiver who will appear before the end of the world. Christian texts also speak of him as the Antichrist in the Book of Revelation, a wicked ruler who brings chaos. His arrival will be one of humanity's greatest trials. Dajjal is said to be one-eyed, his left eye protruding, his right eye blind. On his forehead, the word kafir, unbeliever, will be written, visible only to true believers. He will come from the east, from Khorasan, in modern-day Iran, leading a massive army. He will perform false miracles, raising the dead, bringing rain, making the earth fertile, pretending to be God himself. Many will follow him, deceived by his powers. But he will never enter Mecca or Medina. Salvation will come when the prophet Isa, Jesus, peace be upon him, descends from the heavens. He will slay Dajjal at Lud, and an age of peace and justice will follow. But this peace will not last forever. Other signs of the end will come: the appearance of Gog and Magog, the destruction of the Kaaba, the sun rising from the west, and then Judgment Day will begin, when all living things are destroyed, then resurrected to stand before God. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more creepy stories and apocalyptic theories.
Based on true events, The Faces of Bélmez. 1971, Bélmez, Spain. When Maria Gómez Pereira, a resident of the small Spanish town of Bélmez, noticed a strange stain on her kitchen floor, she had no idea it would become one of the most famous paranormal mysteries in history. At first, it looked like a simple spot, mold perhaps, but soon it began to change. And then, the stain took the clear shape of a human face. Maria was terrified. She tried scrubbing it away again and again. Her husband Juan and son Miguel joined her efforts. Nothing worked. In desperation, Juan took a pickaxe, tore out the piece of floor, and cemented it over. Relief didn't last long. Within weeks, the face reappeared in the very same spot. Word spread quickly. Soon, the story reached the mayor, who ordered the phenomenon to be studied. The family agreed. Workers lifted the kitchen floor. Beneath, at a depth of nearly 3 meters, they found skeletal remains. The most disturbing detail? Several of the skeletons were missing their skulls. The remains were reburied in the Catholic cemetery, but the faces kept appearing. They changed shapes, sometimes within hours, showing the faces of men, women, even children. Priests, students, scientists, journalists, skeptics, everyone wanted to see the Bélmez faces. Skeptics believed it was a hoax. Experiments were carried out. The kitchen was sealed for 3 months, the floor photographed, and samples taken. When the seal was broken, the faces had shifted and changed expression. Chemical analysis suggested traces of organic compounds, possibly hand-painted. Naturally, suspicion fell on Maria herself. But when she died in 2004, many expected the phenomenon to end. It didn't. Even after her death, the faces continued to appear, and still do to this day. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more chilling stories based on true events.
Real creepy stories. The Cultists' Forest. I returned to my parents' home after several years away. Nearby was a forest where I had often walked as a child. It always felt peaceful back then. Nothing strange, nothing frightening. One evening, I decided to relive those childhood walks. It was getting dark when I noticed a fire in the distance. At first, I thought it was just locals sitting around a campfire. Curious, I headed toward it, but as I got closer, I began to hear strange whispers, words I couldn't understand. Hiding behind a tree, I saw something disturbing. A group of people stood around the fire. They weren't laughing or talking like campers. They were chanting, moving in strange patterns. One of them pulled an animal from a sack. They weren't campers, they were cultists, preparing for a ritual. My heart pounded. I knew I had to leave before they noticed me. Slowly, I began to back away. When I was finally far enough to turn and run, my foot snapped a branch. Crack! I don't know if they heard me, but I ran as fast as I could, fueled by adrenaline, until I reached the edge of the forest. At home, I locked every door and called the police. When they arrived, the cultists were gone, but the officers found the remains of a rabbit, tied branches, a bloody knife, strands of human hair, and photographs of people. It seems they had noticed me after all. That forest never felt like home again. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more true creepy stories. Creepy theories and hypotheses. The afterlife. Grave punishment. 1996. A group of independent researchers in the field of thanatology, the study of death, decided to carry out a forbidden experiment. The idea was simple: and horrifying, to test whether the dead truly experience conscious torment in the hours immediately after death, as some religious concepts claim. In particular, the Islamic theory of grave punishment. The subject was a 40-year-old man, Saeed, name changed, sentenced to death for violent crimes. Before his execution, he gave consent to participate. Early that morning, the sentence was carried out. Shortly after, his body was buried at a depth of 2 meters inside a specially designed coffin, equipped with a night vision camera, microphone, and motion sensors. An observer also took part, a man who agreed to be buried nearby for 24 hours to monitor any anomalies. At first, there was silence, just faint soil movements and static. But 34 minutes after burial, the first sound came. A raspy breath, a muffled groan like damaged vocal cords. Then, scratching.
Minutes later, Saeed began to scream. The camera showed his lips moving, as if trying to speak. The audio was distorted, a twisted mix of whispers and moans filled with agony. The observer above ground trembled as the speakers relayed the words. Hot, dark, who's here? They're close. His cries grew chaotic, pleading for help. Sobs, desperate pounding on the coffin lid. And then something else, a deep, inhuman voice not belonging to Saeed. After 1 hour and 7 minutes, all sound suddenly stopped. Motion sensors recorded a sharp drop in activity. Then, absolute silence. The observer, unearthed the next day, was in shock. He confirmed that all night he had heard voices and movements in the coffin next to him. When Saeed's grave was opened, his body was still in place, but his face was frozen in indescribable terror, his nails broken and bloody. What if grave punishment is not just a metaphor, but a reality hidden from us? Thank you for watching.
Found on Reddit, The Forest Stalker. I always loved solo hiking. It was my way to escape the noise of life and reconnect with nature. I often went deep into the wilderness, far from people, far from cell service. But one trip became my last. That day I hiked longer than usual and grew more exhausted than I expected. By 8 p.m., I set up camp, put out the fire, and crawled into my tent. I'm a light sleeper, especially in the woods. I always keep the tent zipper by my side and a knife within reach. I woke suddenly to a sound. The zipper of my tent was slowly being undone. Adrenaline surged. I grabbed my knife and shouted that I was armed. No answer. For a few seconds, there was only silence. And then, the sound of footsteps. Someone sprinting away into the dark. I sat, frozen, gripping the knife, every muscle tense. When everything finally went quiet, I decided not to wait for morning. I packed my gear in a rush and left, walking all night, adrenaline keeping me awake. The next morning, I saw the news. A man's body had been found in that same forest, brutally murdered. It wasn't an accident. That night, the killer had come to my tent. I went to the police, told them what happened. Of course, I became a suspect. They interrogated me for hours, searched my things, but eventually let me go. There was no evidence against me. The murderer was never caught. Sometimes I think, if I had slept just a little deeper that night, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more creepy Reddit stories. Real creepy stories. Forest Tales. Story 1. The Faces on the Walls. A man got lost in the forest and wandered for hours before finding a small cabin. It was empty, but he decided to spend the night, hoping to meet the owners in the morning. As darkness fell, he lay down to sleep, but unease kept him awake. On the walls hung strange portraits, faces with piercing, almost sinister eyes that seemed to watch his every move. Restless and uneasy, he tossed and turned until exhaustion finally pulled him into sleep. When he awoke at dawn, he looked around the cabin and froze in terror. There were no portraits on the walls. They had been windows.
Story 2: The Last Frame. A young woman, an avid photographer, decided to spend a day and night alone in the wilderness. She wasn't afraid. She had camped many times before. All day, she took photos with her film camera, trees, flowers, the beauty of the forest. That night, she slept peacefully in her small tent. Nothing unusual happened. Days later, she developed her film. Every roll was perfect, except for the very last frame. In that final photo, she wasn't holding the camera. She was asleep in her tent, captured in the darkness of night. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more real creepy stories. Real creepy stories. Demons on the Roof. This story was written by the famous Kazakh teacher and folklorist Ibre Altınsadan. It happened in a small Kazakh village. One night, a man ran barefoot from his home in a panic. His wife and son, terrified, followed him and hid at a neighbor's house. When the neighbor asked what had happened, the man sighed heavily and said, "A demon has taken over our home. At night, devils gather on the roof, making terrible noise and playing their wicked games. I even brought a mullah, who recited prayers and dua to drive them away, but they always return. Tonight, they were running again across the roof. Then suddenly, one of them broke through. I barely escaped. As I ran, my hand brushed against its horns." The neighbor frowned. "That sounds like nonsense. Show me these demons." They gathered several men with lanterns and went to the house. Sure enough, the roof was damaged. The straw covering had collapsed, and in the corner lay a goat. Just then, they heard noises from above. Everyone froze in fear. Moments later, the animal leapt down from the roof and ran into the neighbor's yard. It wasn't demons at all. It was simply the neighbor's goats and kids who had climbed onto the roof because it was covered in hay. The roof gave way under their weight, creating the illusion of demons on the roof. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more real creepy stories. Found on Reddit, Grandma. When I was 16, I was asked to stay overnight with an elderly grandmother. She lived alone, and her family friends wanted someone to watch her while they were away. That night, I was asleep when I suddenly heard her calling my name. I got up and went to her room. When I asked what was wrong, she looked at me and said she hadn't called me. Then she added calmly, "It was Ruby who called you." We were the only two people in the house. I assumed she was just confused because of her age. I turned to leave when I heard my name again. But this time, the voice sounded completely different. I froze. Slowly, I looked back at her. She was staring at me intently and said, "I told you, it was Ruby. She's waiting for you. In hell." I was paralyzed with fear. Without thinking, I called my parents and begged them to pick me up right away. It's been 30 years since that night, and I still get chills remembering it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more creepy Reddit stories. Subscriber story. You were lucky. Story 1. This story was told by my grandfather. During the war, his father, my great-grandfather, was walking a young woman home late at night. After leaving her safely, he headed back across a dark, empty field. On the way, he noticed a small bush. At first, he thought nothing of it, until it began moving after him. To test it, he quickened his pace. The bush followed. Terrified, he ran. And then, right in front of him, the bush transformed into something enormous, with a long, shadowy body and glowing red eyes. My great-grandfather sprinted with everything he had, and finally reached a stranger's house. He smashed through the door, collapsing inside. The last thing he heard was a whisper. "You were lucky." Story 2. I have an aunt who always seemed a little strange. She often talked to herself. My father said that one night, years ago, she went to fetch water from the well. She saw something there and was never the same afterward. One night, when I was sleeping in the living room, she woke me suddenly. She said, "Why are you sleeping next to those demons? Go to your bedroom. You're lucky I saw you in the dark, otherwise they would have taken you." There was no one else in the room, but her words chilled me to the bone. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more creepy true stories.